watched a clip with Yada Awakening. He was debating a podcast in regards to if women should stay in a toxic relationship to keep the family or if the women should leave the relationship.
I think first we got to really drill down on what toxic is, because for a lot of people, toxic is just what they don't like.
I 100% believe that we should define what toxicity is. I also agree 100% that toxicity harms the children more than actually helps.
Women should not be in toxic relationships, nor should they create them, or how they misdiagnose it, or how they overinflate it to be something that it's not.
Recently, we had a conversation. We watched a clip with Yada Awakenings. For those who don't know, he goes by Yada for the most part. And basically, he was debating a podcast in regards to if women should stay in a toxic relationship to keep the family or if the women should leave the relationship to keep the family. So, of course, you have one side that says, yes, they need to stay regardless because it is the family. They need to pray on it, whatever's clever. And then his portion or his point was that no, women should leave these toxic relationships because it's not good for the woman, it's not good for the kids, it's not good for anybody that's in there, and it doesn't hold the man accountable for creating that toxic environment. So with that being said, what are your guys' thoughts on this? Should women actually stay in the toxic relationship just to hold the family together? Or is this just another example of women leaving too quickly? Are women more likely, are women just expected to stay despite what's happening, basically? So what are you guys' thoughts?
Man, this is so layered, and it's layered for a lot of reasons, right? My initial answer is no, you don't stay in a toxic situation, because there's two kinds of education that children are getting from watching their parents and watching their parents' relationships. They're getting the explicit, that's what you tell them, right? The rules and the boundaries and all that. But even more so, they're getting an implicit education. They're drawing their own conclusions about the way things work or the way things should work or what's normal or what the world looks like from looking around their household and looking at the people that they've known the longest to see how they interact. So you got to really, really look at what kind of examples you're setting. If you're setting an example of trial and triumph, right? Y'all have your problems, but you get through it, you get better, you don't make the same mistakes twice, then that might not necessarily be toxic, which brings me to my larger point. I think first we got to really drill down on what toxic is, because for a lot of people, toxic is just what they don't like, what doesn't feel comfortable to them in the moment. Change doesn't feel comfortable in the moment. And honestly, the biggest promoter for change is pain. Pain is what makes us do something different. When you're sitting around, you don't get up and get something to eat till you get hungry. You get the hunger pains, right? Pain is a motivator. It's a natural motivator. And pain is not always a reason for us to move as much as it's a reason for us to maybe do something different and do it better. So when I think of toxic, I think of something that I cannot live in, right? I think I gave an analogy some time ago, and I'll use it again because it's simple, right? Water, we all need water to live, right? Human beings, we need water. But if I take a bird and I plunge it into the water and don't let it come up for air, that water is toxic. The water will kill it, right? Fish swim in the water all day and they're fine. Take a fish and leave them out on the sand. The air, that even though it's getting air out of the water, it needs air too. The bird needs air, but too much of something in too high of a concentration, it becomes toxic to you. So that you really, there's not a one size fits all answer for that, in the sense that a person really has to look at their own relationship, right? And say, by staying, what message am I teaching my children? What environment am I putting in them now? And what environment am I putting them in the future as this relationship continues on whatever way it's progressing? I do think people give up too quick. I think everybody thinks that everything's a honeymoon. They think it's happy all the time. They think that no marriage has problems, that you won't fight, that your spouse won't make you sick, and they will. They will get on your last nerve. You'll have those moments and you like Tyler Perry, why did I get married? You're going to feel that sometimes. And hopefully you got a good reason, right? But just because you question it or just because it's hard isn't when you walk away. You walk away when it's broken. And you walk away when it's broken because you don't want to teach your children broken habits and broken mentalities. So yeah, I do think you stick it out, but you have some sense about you. Like, don't leave it the first sign of challenge, because that's what builds strength. Even when you're weight training, right? That muscle failure, that's a good workout when your muscles fail. In a few days, come back, you'll be able to do more. It's okay. But if you're getting crushed under the weight, then maybe you need to go work out someplace else or get you a better workout partner. This analogy kind of died. Go ahead.
Well, no, listen, I had an analogy, right? Because you're talking about like how certain environments can be healthy and then it can be toxic just depending on what it was in. And then I was thinking, like, as you were talking, covering all the sides of the conversation, I was like, I was thinking to myself, like,
Sorry.
wow, it makes sense. And he's right at all these points. It's so like very thoughtful and thorough. I was like, this is toxic for the rest of us trying to have a show where we might have competing opinions, right? Like, I felt like you covered so many sides that like I'd have to find an obscure one to argue with you, which doesn't make for good television uh, or podcasting. So I think it's all love.
I'm toxic. I'm
So what?
toxic.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Listen, talk your talk. I just, sometimes just stay on the side of the street. Is it toxic or no? But no, no, I'm kidding. Because dead ass, I was gonna probably say the same thing. I was like, it depends on your definition of toxic. But what we're really talking about, because I feel like this story only really gains legs because this is something that men have been conditioned to do for a very long time. Like we'll stay in relationships even if it's not good because we prioritize certain things like family. I think the full question was, should women stay in toxic relationships for the family? Right. And we're in the age of equality. Right. And so I think what's good for the goose, some of y'all would say is good for the gander, even though I argue a little bit against that. But if that is the situation, then why would it not make sense? You know what I'm saying? Given the way that everybody wants to be like equal to a certain extent, right? Like you're the one who had these kids. You chose the guy that you were with. I'm assuming you have to see some benefit. I mean, I'm not saying it got to be no benefits, right? But if he's paying some bills, y'all going 50-50 or whatever, he can watch the kids sometimes. If he's bringing utility, if he's not a bad guy, he's a decent father. I mean, I don't know what metrics you're judging that on. Like, is he teaching him to ride a bike? There, like, I don't know. Are they spending quality time? Is just the father who provides? I don't know, right? What the metrics is that some of y'all would use to determine in terms of what family means to you. But I'm just saying that I do think the reason why this comes up is because the expectations are shifting in regards to, yeah, you're a breadwinner too now, right? Okay, cool. You're a head of household too now, right? Cool. You're a boss bitch too, right? Cool. So should you also stay in a relationship if it's in the benefit of the kid? Right? Because a lot of men will stay in unhealthy relationships for the benefit of kids. And to be honest, women will too. Right now, it brings up Jay's point in terms of what is toxic. Right. I feel like nowadays, we joke here on the BLC pod and we use toxic because I think most people are probably toxic, right? Maybe like a little bit more crude version or maybe like a nastier version. We use it here kind of playfully, right? But in truth, I don't think that like the way that people use the word toxic is really about people who can't live in an environment. Right. Nowadays, I think Jay mentioned it like, oh, just because you disagree, oh, that's toxic. Oh, because you have a different opinion. Oh, that's toxic. Right. So what I'm saying is for us, the proper word would probably be toxic when you're just playfully disagreeing or you have a difference of opinion. But if you're talking about things like abuse, for example, that would be toxic, whether it's mental, emotional, financial, or otherwise, right? There are some things that I think most of us could agree would be very difficult for a person to live in that environment. But what's happening is when we hear stories about how many women initiate divorces, when we hear about, oh, it's not about being happy or being content, we also realize that we have to acknowledge that a lot of women are leaving relationships for bullshit that is not toxic. Right. For me, anyways, what I can say though is that if you decide to marry someone and make a commitment with someone, what does commitment mean to you? Right? Do you have steps where you're taking to make sure that you uphold that commitment? And if it falls short, you kind of have a backup. Like even for me, at stages in my relationship where I felt like it was about to be a wrap, I had fail safes. I said, you know what? Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, just in case. We want to take every step that we can. So that way, if we have to walk away from the relationship, that we knew we did everything that we could. There would be no regrets. And hopefully that would allow us both to be amicable regardless of the outcome, right? A lot of y'all just be running so quick. You know what I'm saying? A lot of y'all can't even have simple fucking conversations. A lot of y'all cannot get out of your own emotions way to be able to hear another person so that you can work through whatever issues both of you may have. It's not always one fucking sided. Right. So for me, it's just funny because a lot of times it's crazy how the women who say, oh, this is toxic, end up creating a toxic relationship in and of themselves. Like if you're sitting there being hyper jealous or hyper, demanding and no consideration, and you're holding back sex and you're doing all these things, right? In your rightful way to do it, because women can just be crazy and that's okay, right? Until the man draws a boundary. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is that equally that yes, women should not be in toxic relationships, nor should they create them, right? Or recognize how they participate in creating them sometimes to a certain extent, or how they misdiagnose it, or how they overinflate it to be something that it's not. Meanwhile, you have children that you've brought into this world that I don't think a lot of y'all are really considering. Right. So, yes, I'm not saying being in a relationship with the guy's choking you out. None of that. Nobody reasonably would say these things. The reason why I think this is a conversation is because I think, reasonably speaking, too many of y'all are bailing too quickly. Y'all quit jobs too quickly. Y'all quit school too quickly. Y'all quit careers too quickly. Y'all quit ambitions too quickly. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so it's okay to say that maybe a little bit more stick-to-itiveness will allow you to go further. But more importantly, as a parent, now you can't just consider just you anymore. You have to consider your child, right? And shout out to all the men out there who made the sacrifice, even though some of them probably shouldn't have, same way some of you shouldn't, but some of y'all should have. Some of y'all, the best thing that y'all could have did was to stick it the fuck out because your child deserved that, right? Some of y'all, that'll be the best thing that you do on this planet is by simply being there and creating an environment for your child to thrive in. Y'all think y'all finna be something else. You know what I'm saying? We got to start being a little bit more honest, a little bit, right? And so to answer this question simply, some of y'all do need to stay. You know what I'm saying? And I think far more of y'all need to stay than y'all leaving. You know what I'm saying? Yes, please leave if it's toxic, but y'all, I'm gonna leave it alone. Go ahead, Esther.
So it's actually interesting that you should mention the men's side of the house pertaining to this particular question, as far as that the men were staying in toxic relationships. And I'm going to say that the men were staying because it was comfortable for them to be in that toxic relationship, because most men won't leave if they're comfortable in it. And so that's why they're staying. So, for
Cap.
example, I'm going to say, for example, if there's, so one of the things that Yada pointed out was that the men can cheat, the men can do this, they can do that, they can be disrespectful, they can do a bunch of things, and the woman will stay. She'll forgive one time, she'll forgive twice, she'll forgive 3, 4, 5 times, and she'll stay. And then while the man may say, hey, the relationship was toxic because the woman failed to recognize her part, i.e., like the guy, I think Jay mentioned in a previous episode about some guy was talking about their karma, this woman karma. I don't know what your karma did that I cheat on you all the time. So this is your karma, right? And it was a joke. But it's the fact that the woman may have contributed to why the guy may have done had some type of culpability, even though at the end of the day, it was his choice to do that. But because she forgave, he stayed. So men are less likely to leave, not because they're doing it for the family, but because it's more comfortable for them to stay, particularly if the woman is constantly forgiving them for their actions, their transgressions or whatnot, or is more accepting of it. Now,
Cap.
on the
I'm
woman's
going to record
side,
says cap. I'll come
I
back to that.
you can say cap all day, but at the end of the day, men didn't start complaining about women leaving until they realized they couldn't have multiple families, or they couldn't have these relationships on the other side of town. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, women are leaving too quickly. What about staying for the family? But I want to talk about that too. I would say the previous generations, right? Not going back to old time and all that good stuff, but the previous generation, i.e., the grandmothers and so forth, they actually were conditioned to sacrifice for the family's stability because they had to, right? But those same mothers or grandmothers told their daughters, hey, you're in different positions and you don't necessarily have to make those same sacrifices that I had to make. And this is probably leading to why women may leave quicker. They may forgive once or twice, but you also have those microwavable relationships where they're like, oh, nope, you did something one time wrong. I'm out. I'm bouncing because I already was warned that I shouldn't have to stay in a relationship that I don't want to. So I would acknowledge that there are some women who treat marriage as a microwave, like I'm in and I'm out. And so this whole concept of women staying while it's toxic for it to keep the family together, I 100% disagree with. However, both you guys had some very valid points, especially pertaining to defining toxicity, because not every conflict is toxic. The challenge is distinguishing between what's a solvable issue and what's actually considered a harmful pattern, right? And sometimes it get lost, i.e., people don't necessarily identify what could be solvable because they're not willing to put that work in to determine if that issue is solvable. So, for example, one of the top reasons for leaving is finances, right? And so if the issue is finances and you never sat together and have this whole budget scheme or have this conversation about how you're going to manage your finances, or you feel that you can't come to an agreement, then it's like, you know what, I'm just going to give up. But how do we know that issue, or how do you know, as the person sitting in that relationship, that finances isn't something that you could have worked out? Depending on, do you need to get a job? Do I need to get a job? Do we need to change our job? Do we need to change from traditional to 50-50, 60-70, or whatever the case may, or 60-40, or whatever the case may be, because that may be solvable just depending on what the root of that issue is. If but however, it's a harmful pattern, such as the person is a gambling addict and they're constantly putting you in extreme debt. And they're, no matter how many times they went to Gamblers Anonymous, they fall off the wagon. And next thing you know, you once again about to be on the verge of being evicted. Well, that's a harmful pattern and therefore it's toxic. So it's determining those levels to say, okay, now it's time for me to leave. I'm going to say the one thing that really bothered me about this particular clip, or the guy who was speaking against Yada, was that he kept saying, no, you need to pray on it. I feel that religion itself has the community in a chokehold for various, and while the chokehold has lessened to a certain extent today's time, but that chokehold is still there because it was like, oh, you need to pray on it, you need to pray on it. And most women, as you know, in our community, there's a lot of women who go to church and are predominantly the ones in church, and to say that they are praying on it. So for those type of women, when they do leave, it's because they have prayed on it. They have sought the community. They have went to their pastor, because this guy kept saying, go to your pastor. And because the pastor in the community, and he talked about the whole it takes a village concept, but he talked about it in a way where the village lords over that woman versus the village coming together and being a true village to help each other out. So all I'm saying is that in this way, in this particular case, I agree with most of you guys' points. I 100 believe that you should define what toxicity is. I also agree 100% that toxicity harms the children more than actually helps. Because if I'm constantly seeing my mother being beaten as an example for worst case scenario, then I'm more likely to accept being beaten on if I'm the woman. I'm more likely to accept being the beater, because sometimes that pattern tends to repeat itself in their relationships, right? Or they develop harmful styles like self-harming and so forth. So 100% kids start learning dysfunction as being normal versus recognizing its dysfunction. The last thing I would say is that mothers, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because I think that fathers should actually have just as much impact as well. But they've done studies that have shown if the mother stays unhappy, then the household is unhappy. And I think that's actually a disservice to fathers because it takes away the father's portion, his emotional too, well-being and so forth. And I believe if both parties are unhappy, then that child is also unhappy. So neither party should stay in an unhealthy relationship. And I will acknowledge that some women, particularly in these times, are more likely to jump because they are told it's okay because they are breadwinners, or they're making their own bread, or there's nothing necessarily tying them to it. So,
Okay, first I agree with Nick. A lot of it was cap. I will say that when people leave, a lot of times they leave, I'm gonna go find my happiness. I'm just not fulfilled here. I just don't feel like myself. I have to go discover. I have to find the bigger me. That is not a toxic thing. That's the person out on fairyland or whatever. That is not something they're doing for their kid. That's something a person's doing for themselves. If a person's really staying for the child, then the decision that's being made is strictly about the happiness of the child, not about how they feel. Men stay in marriages and they get up every morning and they go to work and they come home from work and they do all of the things. And a lot of times they're not happy. Like you said, S&M is happy wife, happy life, right? And the man's narrative is kind of to the side. So this happiness thing or this whatever, like, and even in a unhealthy relationship, even if your relationship is unhealthy, it doesn't mean it can't be fixed, right? If it's dead, Jim, if it's just dead, if there ain't no love there, if it ain't no compassion there or whatever, that's different than unhealthy, right? That's just something that's not even alive. And that is toxic. That's something worth leaving. Now, you said something else I thought was like, whew, huge cap. You said something about women being more forgiving. When the numbers are in, ma'am, that's just not true.
sir,
Hold on,
before we jump
hold on,
there, yes,
hold
sir,
on,
Go ahead.
hold
because I
on.
have some
Go ahead.
pushback too.
Yeah, if you was
Come on.
gonna push back and pivot, my brother, you should have told me because I had
Okay.
that little soft ass pushback that you did on S&M was not quite
Now I got
enough.
pushback
So
too.
yeah, cool.
All right,
So
go
let me
ahead. Go
push
ahead.
back
All right.
then. First of
Push
all,
back. Push back.
I'm pushing back on this idea of like, oh, men stay because they're comfortable, like as if obligation and duty has no role in that. as if sometimes men are like obliged because we're the ones who made the proposal in the first place. We're the ones who have the responsibility. Oftentimes, we're also the ones who take the blame a lot of times for the relationship not leaving. Like, how often can a man say, I'm going to leave this marriage because I'm just not happy? A nigga would not be able to get that shit off. Right. But a lot of y'all do get that shit off. So I get it. It helps your narrative to say, oh, it's because men are comfortable. Comfortable with what exactly? Right? The responsibility, the bullshit, the nagging. Like, if a nigga's not happy, he's still in that home, in the driveway, struggling to get inside the house because he's not happy, but he still has to walk in there. He still has to pay the bills. He still has to fucking show up. Niggas don't get the luxury of being in their feelings as much as y'all do, even if a nigga is going through depression. Right? We don't get that. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, in terms of, oh, because we're comfortable. No, sometimes we just learn to be uncomfortable for the sake of y'all. And maybe you don't get it because you've never had to subjugate yourself to women in general, especially when oftentimes that can be illogical and overly emotional, right? Maybe you don't get that part of it, right? But I absolutely do. So that's why I'm like, that is fucking cap. Niggas make decisions to stay in relationships oftentimes because it's the obligation and the responsibility. You're not even looked at as a man if you don't handle your business and take your responsibility. You can still be a woman and abdicate your responsibility as a mother. Like, you could drop your kids off at your grandmama's house and people would still see you as a mother. The fuck are you talking about? So I got to push back on that, number one. And then number two, about the throwback to the, oh, we love to throw it back in terms of the moms told the daughters and all that. How do those moms know that if they weren't able to keep a nigga? I feel like when we recount this story of generation to pass down, we forgot the generation that decided to do their own fucking thing. The one that rebelled against what their mamas told them. You know what I mean? The ones that was outside. The ones that had to learn the hard way that maybe mama was right until she wasn't. That now all of a sudden, because she had to put her head on the stove, now she is advising her daughter from a hurt position in terms of how she should deal with men because she didn't listen to her. So y'all make it seem like a straight line. Nah, sis, there was a lot of y'all mamas who was telling y'all, nah, queen, this is what you do over here. There's a lot of y'all mamas who was good examples of wives because they still married to their husbands. Right? What we're really talking about are the ones who were husbandless, who set their daughters out there to the world, into the wild. So I'm sorry with these little cute little, oh, mama told them, girl, do for yourself, girl. Do you yourself, girl. Yeah, the ones who made bad choices, for sure. You know what I'm saying? The ones who made good choices, right? Those daughters, even if their fathers were not perfect, was out there looking for men like their daddies. So, so miss me with some of that. And lastly, other pushback. Unhappy. Who the fuck gives a fuck about your happiness? Like, we have a responsibility. When you go to work, are you happy to go to work every day? No. We drive hours upon hours. We do a lot of shit that we're not happy about because as adults, we have to be responsible. I hate to break it to y'all. Maybe a marriage should be included in some of that, right? Maybe a relationship, a family should be included in some of that. Some of y'all think that y'all happiness or unhappiness is a ticket to fucking leave. Where, Sway? And y'all keep on wanting to put it on your grandmama. They had integrity. That's what they had. They had responsibility. They had commitment is what they had, right? Y'all
They had
motherfuckers
long
went from
suffering.
selfless to selfish as fuck. We should get another shirt. Selfish as fuck. Because everything else is centered around y'all. And because, I'm not happy, I get to abdicate all of my responsibilities. Fuck out of here.
Okay, so first, oh man, I'm so happy to push back on this, on your pushback, on all y'all pushback. When I said comfortable, and the reason why it's comfortable, because if you could do whatever the hell you want to do, even if you are holding, because I never said that you weren't being responsible. I never said that just because you're comfortable, you're still not being responsible. I just said that men are less likely to leave because they're comfortable. Because if they're allowed to lie, cheat, steal, or whatever they're doing in that relationship, then yes, they are comfortable. They're not going to go because they're doing whatever the fuck they want to do. So they're not going to go, even if they are unhappy, which led to them to lie, cheat, steal, or whatever they're doing in that relationship because of that. So when we talk about unhappy, that's unhappiness on both sides. I also want to stop this bullshit that women are majority leaving because of unhappiness, when in reality, they have numerous studies that has constantly stated the top reasons for people to leave. And unhappiness was not in the top 5. Now, I will say irreconcilable differences technically could have some unhappy tendencies, but they said stay unhappy, and that stay unhappy could be multiple factors. So, for example, when they talk about domestic labors and chores, right? As far as women are constantly carrying the emotional, mental, physical load within the
So
household. I'm saying, so if you're going to talk about what men
God, I built you
responsibility
for
and
that.
roles are, what I'm saying is that we're talking about when we constantly say, oh, it's unhappy, you guys are making it seem like that's the majority, when unhappy is not even in the top 5 reasons for women to leave. It's actually the emotional division of labor, is
Unhappy.
the
She's
cheating,
unhappy
the
about the emotional division of labor. Go ahead, please
no,
continue.
when
Mhm.
I'm saying division of
Go
labor,
ahead.
so look, and here's the other thing too, I'm gonna say too. You guys acting like
You
women
see what
aren't
I did
contributing
You
financially
see
to
what
the
you did there?
relationship as well. You guys are acting like the majority of women, especially in the Black community, are not contributing to the household finances as well, which is why we have so many 50-50 conversations in the first place.
We're not saying
So
that.
she's also
No,
being
we're not saying
responsible
that.
and bringing that into the household as well, in
As she
addition
should.
to carrying all that other shit that she has to carry as well. Now, I'm just saying that you guys are making it seem as if women are like, oh, I'm just done. I'm just over it. When that's not what's happening. That is not the majority of the time. Women tend to be long suffering, even in boyfriend girlfriend relationships. That's why there's so many men who have no problem cheating on their woman, because the
It's because they want
woman
the ring.
will accept it and forgive them over and over again until they had enough. And then it's the woman's problem that her man can control his
I
dick,
ain't
or it's the
accepting
woman's
nothing.
problem that she didn't make this man happy enough, so he went out and got his happiness. So I'm just calling cap on all of what you guys just said just in this last portion, because
We
you're
just call it cat. Just as we
dismissing
call it
valid
calf.
claims that of how women feel based on, I'm going to call, based on some bullshit and perception that is just all about the woman being too emotional and feeling unhappy in general, when there's all the root reasons. If somebody say, oh, my man's always cheating on me, so I'm unhappy. So, but the root reason is he's cheating. If
That's enough.
somebody says, oh, I'm tired because I pay 50-50 and then I come home and I still do 100% of childcare and so forth, and that's why I'm unhappy. But then all you heard was the unhappy without recognizing the root reasons. So I'm saying, let's stop the cap on root reasons and covering all, saying, oh, well, that was just unhappy, recognized without recognizing the root reasons. That's
Okay,
what I'm saying.
let's roll this back. Nobody leaves what they happy about. Period. Okay? Nobody goes, "Oh my god, I get hit every night. I'm leaving this bitch." Nobody does that. So whatever reason the person has for leaving, it stems from some unhappiness. That's not the point. The point is, in the face of your displeasure, in the face of your lack of happiness, are you going to stick it out and find a way to make it work?
On
That is
behalf of the family and the
on
kids.
behalf of the family. That's the defining line we're talking about here.
Thank you,
Now,
Which
Jay.
again,
women have done. They wait till the children get 18 and then they bounce. And they still get shitted on because they waited till the child got 18 and
Nobody ain't
bounced.
shitting on them.
no,
Nobody ain't shitting
Shoot.
on them.
They
nobody
Women who
still
have
get
been
talked
married.
about. They still get
by
talked
other
about
women.
if they wait until
Thank you,
the
Jay.
child
Thank
leave,
you.
because it'll be like, why you wait this long? We literally just had Devin the expert talking about the great divorces and why folks divorcing in the gray age. Well, they waited till the child left.
Okay,
That's
good.
why.
But that's not a large number.
I'm
That's
just
not a
saying
large.
it's an
Listen,
example.
it's S&M. Listen, let me tell you something, right? Until you meet a woman who tells you that she left her husband because she was growing apart, like I low key have met a large, especially those women who travel, for example, right? There's a large number of women who I've met, like talked to, and they've left these relationships not because the nigga cheated, not because, but because they outgrew them. Matter of fact, we talked about this, right? Or no, we didn't talk about it on the show. It said like 58% of people got divorced because one partner felt like they outgrew the other, right? Or some shit like that. You know who the partner is most likely to say some shit like that? A woman. I hate to break it to you, right? Because in fact, we're expected to be above y'all, right? To cover y'all, right? I want to make it seem the type of way. So the idea that a man would outgrow a woman does not make sense, right? But the idea that a woman can feel like she's outgrown a man makes absolute sense. For women, especially who are competing with niggas still. I'm reading Gabrielle Union's book, and a lot of her relationship, you know what she did? She competed with her nigga. What the fuck are we talking about here? Like when I say women create toxic relationships, it's like I'm being dead ass. So yeah, we can paint the whole victim because, oh my God, she's done all. Nah. This question is only really relevant because we're not going to ask a man this question because we already know the answer to that. It's only
Bullshit.
relevant because a lot of y'all have left. What's that, man?
I said bullshit. The reason why I'm not going to ask a man that question is
Because
because
we
we don't
already
want
do it.
to. Because the conversation is always about women. That's why we're not going to ask the man. That's why. It's because the
Go ask
conversation
me
Because
is
the
we
question
always
then.
already do it,
about
S&M.
women.
It's always, you know what's the problem? I want to hear stories about women talk about, man, I had to sit in the driveway for 45 minutes before I could walk into the house. Or how often I need to go here just to kind of clear my thoughts because every time I get home.
It's
Like,
called the
I'm
shower.
sorry.
They
Yeah,
sit in the shower and
for
cry.
For really?
Yes.
Really?
Women they
I
stand in
hate
the
to laugh.
shower and they cry because that's the only space they got to themselves sometimes. So it's
That's
just
true,
not
that's true.
men who's sitting in the driveway,
Because y'all
women
be
sitting
crying
in the
over
house
bullshit,
crying.
though. Y'all be crying over bullshit,
Lord
though,
have
like
mercy. What now? Go ahead with the forgiveness. Like, so you're saying that men are supposed to be more forgiving, huh? Is that why they sitting in the driveway? Because they're more forgiving?
He raised his
Well, look,
voice at me even though
forgiveness.
I was bothering him for 4 days straight,
Just
dick in his
minimizing
vagina.
women emotions, and that's just crazy work. That's crazy work in the season
I am
finale.
not
Just the
minimizing.
minimization.
I
Goodness
am not
gracious.
minimizing. I'm
Or
Go
not.
ahead and get that driveway conversation of how men are more forgiving than women after we just got all this
yeah, go ahead,
minimization
Shay.
of women's emotions.